You look at the phone in your hand, thin, flat, and it disappears under a layer of fabric. Now imagine something even smaller sitting next to it. But instead of a battery and chips inside, it's steel, springs, and real ammunition. That's the world of micro pistols. Guns that are smaller than your phone, but way more dangerous than you might think. As clothes keep getting thinner, carrying a full-size legal self-defense weapon just isn't realistic anymore for many adults. They need something small enough to stay hidden all day, but still serious enough to trust in the worst-case scenario. The problem is, the smaller they get, the harder they are to shoot. And the more you need to understand the law, understand how the mechanism works, and stick to absolute safety discipline. These smaller-than-your-phone items aren't toys. They're a test of how responsible the person holding them really is. Number 1. Seecamp LWS32. If this entire list were a miniature competition, then the Seecamp LWS32 would be the contestant crossing the final line. So small that many first-time handlers mistake it for a keychain or a metal lighter. Its specs sound like a joke. An overall length of about 4.25 inches, a height around 3.25 inches, a thickness somewhere near 0.86 inches, a barrel of roughly 2.06 inches, and an unloaded weight of about 11.5 ounces. This means that if you place it on a table next to a large screen smartphone, the LWS32 practically hides behind it, shorter, lower, and thinner. Inside that stainless steel frame, barely the size of your palm, is a 32 ACP semi-automatic pistol with a 6+1 magazine and a double-action-only trigger system with a long, heavy pull and absolutely no external safety. That's exactly why it deserves the top spot in micro pistols smaller than your phone and way deadlier than you think. It pushes the limit of how small a mass-produced pistol can be, yet still remains fully serious as a real firearm. Seecamp built the LWS32 around a very extreme philosophy: a deep concealment pocket pistol for extremely close distances, simplified to the maximum. The frame, slide, trigger, hammer, and magazine catch are all stainless steel, giving it that dense metal block feeling in your hand despite its tiny size. Its Deo trigger is long and heavy, but the pull is smooth and predictable, serving both as a replacement for an external safety lever and as a built-in safeguard, since this pistol typically sits very close to the body in lawful pocket holsters, ankle holsters, or other deep concealment setups. The sight system is basically a small groove on the slide. Many people even joke that it might as well not have sights. That exactly matches its purpose. This isn't a pistol meant for distance, but for extremely close situations where simply getting the muzzle aligned matters far more than a perfect sight picture. The reason the LWS32 is chosen for this list is because it pushes the smaller-than-your-phone idea to the absolute limit. At just over 4 inches in length and a bit above 3 inches in height, it fits into pockets where even modern micro 9mm pistols struggle. The thickness, around 0.8-something inches, makes it practically flat, with no protrusions or sharp angles, making it very difficult to print through clothing when paired with a proper pocket holster. The 32 ACP round, combined with the 11.5-ounce weight, produces a recoil that many describe as sharp but not hand-snapping. It's still centerfire, it still has kick, but nowhere near the smash of micro 9mm or ultralight 380 pistols. For adults who truly need the smallest lawful backup possible, for example, as a secondary gun beneath a primary duty-sized pistol, the LWS32 was long considered the final form of pocket pistols. The greatest strength of the Seecamp LWS32 is how easily it disappears. Small, flat, dense, and made entirely of stainless steel, it handles sweat much better than cheap polymer pistols, and is far less prone to rust when kept against the body all day with basic care. A 6+1 capacity might sound modest, but in a frame smaller than a smartphone, it's actually very reasonable. The heavy dowel trigger, with its long and consistent pull, gives disciplined users a very intentional shooting rhythm. Every shot is a deliberate choice, with no risk of a light accidental press. Its delayed blowback behavior and thick steel build also make it far more durable for long-term daily carry than some budget designs that loosen quickly. But it comes with a list of drawbacks that every Seecamp fan acknowledges. First is the grip size. With a height just over 3 inches, most adults can place only 2 main fingers on the grip, leaving the pinky dangling. That means any grip error is amplified. Without a stable wrist and consistent trigger pull, the muzzle can easily drift off target, even though the pistol is meant only for extremely close distances. The near symbolic sights make anything beyond 7 yards not only difficult, but contrary to the design philosophy. The .32 ACP round, though beloved by its fans, still sits below 9mm and 380 in energy. So choosing the LWS32 means accepting that you're trading firepower for size and concealment. Additionally, its extremely small frame and tight tolerances once caused some early production batches to be somewhat picky, preferring certain .32 ACP loads over others. That's why many enthusiasts recommend thoroughly testing whichever ammunition you plan to use long-term, instead of assuming any round will work. The LWS32 is also not an easy choice for beginners. Its heavy dowel trigger requires a smooth, steady pull along a fairly long travel. Without solid technique, groups tend to fall low or drift sideways. The dense weight, despite the tiny size, can feel unexpectedly heavy in light pockets, and the delayed blowback recoil in such a small frame creates a unique snap that only regular practice can familiarize you with. Because it often lives in deep concealment locations, lint, dust, and tiny debris entering the magazine or chamber become real concerns. Users must be highly disciplined with routine cleaning, checking magazine smoothness, and replacing springs when the time comes. In terms of price, the Seecamp LWS32 has never been a cheap toy. Current markets show new models typically listed and sold around $550 to over $650 United States dollars, depending on finish, color, and retailer. Some California edition or special finish versions go even higher. Recent price data shows the average new unit at a bit over $550, while used ones usually range from about $340 to over $420, depending on condition and included accessories. Buyers are essentially paying for an ultra-tiny stainless steel pocket pistol with a strong reputation, not a budget throw-in-your-pocket novelty item. Within the bigger picture of micro pistols smaller than your phone and way deadlier than you think, the Seecamp LWS32 is the piece that closes the story. It proves how far you can shrink a semi-automatic pistol while still keeping real-world reliability. Smaller than a phone, dense like a metal block, chambered for a caliber just strong enough to remain a lawful self-defense tool for adults, yet carrying a very high demand for responsible use. You must understand the laws, the limits of .32 ACP, the behavior of a DEO pistol with almost no sights, and treat it with the same respect as any dangerous weapon. When used in its proper role, as a deep backup, carried lawfully, trained seriously, and maintained carefully, the LWS32 shows that a pistol half the size of a smartphone is not harmless at all if the person holding it isn't fully alert and responsible. Number 2. Sig Sauer P365. If you had to pick one pistol that represents the micro-compact era, the Sig Sauer P365 is almost always the first name that comes up. It's the kind of character that walks into the room smaller than the phone in your pocket, yet instantly forces the entire market to rearrange itself. The specs of the original P365 sound almost unbelievable. An overall length of about 5.8 inches, a height around 4.3 inches, a width of roughly 1 inch, a 3.1-inch barrel, and an unloaded weight of about 17.8 ounces. Within a size that fits comfortably in your palm, it carries a basic 10+1 round 9mm magazine with optional 12 and 15 round magazines that only extend the grip slightly. That's why the P365 sits firmly within the spirit of micro pistols smaller than your phone and way deadlier than you think. The footprint is smaller than a modern large-screen smartphone, but the firepower approaches that of many traditional compact pistols. What made the P365 a game-changer wasn't just the magazine capacity, it was how it shoots. It's a striker-fired, polymer-frame pistol using a familiar short-recoil locked breech system, but compressed into a micro-compact package that hides remarkably well. The Sig system trigger is clean, with short travel, moderate weight, and a clear break, so anyone used to striker-fired duty pistols will find the transition very natural. The X-ray 3-day night sights found on most versions provide a bright, easy-to-see sight picture, even in tricky lighting conditions. On the range, the P365 delivers a true 9mm feel instead of a toy-like snap. The recoil is firm, but thanks to a full, well-shaped grip, smart angles, and a just right overall weight, an adult user with basic technique can maintain fast, controlled shots within the 3 to 10 yard zone, without the gun pulling wildly off target. Another reason it earned a place in this list is that the P365 redefined what daily carry means. Before it arrived, you usually had to choose between tiny mouse guns with low capacity or larger, heavier compacts. The P365 brought those two worlds together: a frame small enough to slide into a thin IWB holster, a deep pocket holster, or even appendix carry for people with the right body type, while its 10, 12, or 15 rounds give users a sense that they're carrying something with real depth, not just a take a few shots and hope for the best backup. The accessory ecosystem, from grip modules and extended magazines to red dots on the X, XL, and Macro variants, has turned the P365 platform into an entire family, with the original 3.1-inch model as the core. And when it comes to smaller than your phone, remember, a modern smartphone is usually 6 inches or longer, over 7 inches tall, and often more than 1 inch thick with a case. The P365 fits well within that size range, yet carries a rail, real sights, and the structural durability of a miniaturized duty pistol. Of course, no pistol in this list is perfect. The P365 comes with a few points adult users have to accept. Early production batches had typical new platform growing pains, striker issues, visible drag marks on spent casings, and some reports of wear when firing high-pressure +P ammunition continuously. Sig corrected these issues in later production runs, but for very early used examples, careful buyers still check the serial number, internal condition, and verify that the updates were applied. The recoil of a 9mm pistol weighing under 500 grams, with a thin frame and short grip, is not exactly gentle for beginners. Without solid grip and trigger control, it's easy to pull groups off target, especially when trying to shoot quickly. And even though 10, 12, and 15 round magazines are impressive for a micro-frame gun, they're no substitute for actual practice. Relying on capacity as a skill replacement will make the P365 reveal the opposite very quickly. On the positive side, what you get once you get used to the P365 is absolutely worth it. The 9mm Luger caliber allows the use of all modern defensive ammunition. The 10+1 flush-fit magazine keeps the overall height at around 4.3 inches, while the 12 and 15 round extensions essentially turn it into a light compact when you need more capacity. The smaller-than-a-phone frame makes daily carry realistic. Shorts, t-shirts, thin dress shirts, all can conceal it well with the right holster and a lawful setup. The sheer popularity of the P365 line also means holsters, spare parts, sights, trigger improvements, and aftermarket grip modules are everywhere, from Wilson Combat and Legion custom parts to conversion kits for .380 for people who don't like 9mm recoil. For adult users willing to train, the P365 can run serious practice drills like a duty pistol while still disappearing from sight like a slightly thick smartphone. As for price, the P365 isn't super cheap, but it's not an unattainable luxury item either. At launch, many places listed MSRP in the $600 to almost $700 United States dollars range, depending on configuration, with special editions costing more. Current price data shows the standard new model commonly sold around just over $510, while used ones often sit around $450, depending on year, condition, and accessories. On store shelves, it's normal to see prices from roughly $500 to over $650 for the standard micro compact 9mm version, with X, XL, Macro, and AXG Legion variants climbing much higher. In other words, buyers are paying for a platform that has become the benchmark of the entire category, with power, size, and accessory support that few competitors can ignore. Within the broader picture of micro pistols smaller than your phone and way deadlier than you think, the Sig Sauer P365 is the foundational building block of the 9mm micro compact generation. Smaller than a phone, carrying enough rounds for people to feel confident, and shooting like a larger pistol if the user treats it seriously. When carried within the law, paired with regular checks, proper maintenance, good ammunition choices, and responsible practice, the P365 delivers one clear lesson. Size isn't the only factor that matters. It's how much engineering is packed into each mile of the frame, and how an adult handles it with the respect any lethal force tool demands. Number 3. Ruger LCP2. In the world of modern micro pistols, the Ruger LCP2 is almost the textbook definition of just drop it in your pocket and go. When you place it next to the smartphone you're using right now, the numbers explain everything. An overall length of about 5.17 inches, a height somewhere between a little over 3.7 to around 4.05 inches depending on how you measure, a thickness between 0.7 and 0.9 inches, and an unloaded weight of roughly 10.6 ounces. That means both the footprint and thickness of the LCP2 are far smaller than a large-screen smartphone. Yet inside that ultra-thin glass-filled nylon frame is a .380 ACP pistol with a 2.75-inch barrel, a 6+1 magazine, and Ruger's updated secure action single-action style trigger. That is exactly why it appears in the list: micro pistols smaller than your phone and way deadlier than you think. From the outside, it looks like a tiny black plastic accessory, but in reality, it is a very serious lawful self-defense tool for adult users. Ruger built the LCP2 as a direct upgrade to the original LCP, keeping the lightweight compact pistol philosophy, but fixing the weaknesses people complained about. The trigger was redesigned into a short, lighter, more predictable single-action version, replacing the never-ending DAO feel of the older model. The slide has deeper serrations, making it easier to grip, and although the sights are still fixed and low profile, they're a bit larger and clearer, helping users actually see what they're aiming at. The rounded polymer frame has no sharp edges, and the grip now includes better texturing to help the hand stay planted on a pistol that's less than 1 inch wide. All of this is packed into a .380 pistol that's thinner than your phone, small enough for pocket holsters, extremely shallow IWB setups, or even ankle carry for adults, as long as it's set up correctly and carried legally. The reason the LCP2 earns a place in this list isn't just its size. It's because it's one of the rare pocket pistols that makes many people say, for how small it is, it's actually shootable. The cleaner trigger makes close-range shots, from extremely close distances out to roughly 7 yards, much more manageable instead of pulling rounds downward like many heavy-trigger DO micro pistols tend to do. The recoil is still the sharp, snappy kind you expect from an ultralight .380. But the reworked grip, with a small ledge at the bottom and deeper texture, helps the hand stay more stable during short strings of 2 or 3 rounds. Within the environment it was designed for, fast, tight, close-range shots in living room distances, parking lots, or hallways. Many adults find they shoot noticeably better with the LCP2 than with early generation .380 mouse guns, simply because the trigger is more forgiving. The LCP2's biggest strength is its readiness. It's so small that it's hard to find an excuse to leave it at home, so light that it barely pulls on your pants or belt, yet still a .380 with 6+1 rounds. Enough for many adults to feel they have a safety margin beyond what .22 or .32 offer. Ruger has been producing the polymer frame and steel slide for years, so parts, holsters, and accessories are extremely common, from ultra-thin pocket holsters to inside the waistband clips. The secure action trigger, when properly learned, feels closer to a mini striker-fired pistol than an old-school Dow, making practice more comfortable for those used to short travel triggers on full-size duty guns. And most importantly, its truly smaller than a phone size allows adult users to set up very discreet carry positions when wearing thin clothing, where compact or modern micro double-stack pistols are simply too large. But the list of drawbacks isn't short. First, this is still an extremely light .380. 10.6 ounces for a centerfire semi-auto means the recoil is sharp and snappy, especially for new shooters or people who grip lightly. The grip is short, offering space for only 2 main fingers with the flush magazine, making muzzle control during quick follow-up shots more sensitive to errors. Many people use extended base plates to give their pinky somewhere to rest. The .380 ACP caliber, while widely used, is still a constant topic of debate compared to 9mm in terms of stopping power and penetration through obstacles, meaning the LCP2, by nature, remains a pistol meant for very specific scenarios, not a one-size-fits-all firearm. Additionally, a 6+1 capacity sounds reasonable for such a tiny gun, but when compared to modern micro double-stack 9mm carrying 10 or 12 rounds, it starts to show its previous generation roots. The sights, although improved, are still small fixed sights, not ideal for anything beyond about 10 yards. Some users also report that the gun can be a bit picky with certain inexpensive hollow point ammunition, especially early on when the feed ramp and slide edges are still sharp, so choosing high-quality ammunition and running enough rounds through it to break in the system is not something to skip. And finally, because this is a true pocket pistol, lint, dust, sweat, and debris are constant realities. If someone forgets regular cleaning or lets the gun rub directly against keys and other metal objects, the magazine and internal mechanisms can get dirty much faster than a duty pistol carried in a rigid holster. In terms of price, the Ruger LCP2 sits in the budget-friendly for a big-name micro pistol category. Early reviews noted suggested retail prices around $280 to nearly $300 United States dollars for the .380 version, while more recent market data shows new guns selling around $300 to $325, and used ones ranging from about $190 to $245, depending on condition, variant, and included accessories. That means, for a price not far from other budget .380s, buyers get a pocket pistol with years of real-world use behind it, with widely available parts, holsters, and spare magazines. In the context of micro pistols smaller than your phone and way deadlier than you think, the Ruger LCP2 is a textbook choice for adults who prioritize lawful daily carry, maximum concealment, and familiarity with the .380 caliber. It's not the pistol for putting hundreds of rounds through every weekend, and it isn't a powerhouse in the stopping force world, but for adults who understand the laws where they live, accept the limits of this platform, and take the time to practice trigger control, recoil control, and proper pocket gun care. The LCP2 proves that sometimes the most serious tool looks like a tiny accessory smaller than the phone in your pocket. And that's exactly why it deserves respect. Number 4. Smith & Wesson M&P Bodyguard 380. In this entire list, the Smith & Wesson M&P Bodyguard 380 is the small but versatile character, built to be the standard pocket-sized pistol for adults who legally carry every day. Looking at the numbers, it really sits in the same size class as a smartphone. An overall length of about 5.2 to 5.3 inches, a height of around 4.1 inches, a thickness of roughly 0.8 inches, a barrel length of 2.75 inches, and an unloaded weight of around 11.9 ounces. Within that small footprint, the original version fits a 6+1 380 ACP magazine, while the newer Bodyguard 2.0 pushes capacity to 10+1 and 12+1, even though the frame is only about 5.5 inches long, 4 inches tall, and under 0.9 inches thick. In other words, if you place the Bodyguard 380 next to a large smartphone, the gun will be shorter, narrower, but with power that's in a completely different category, perfectly matching the theme micro pistols smaller than your phone, and way deadlier than you think. The Bodyguard 380 is built around three principles: small, light, and still functional as a serious handgun. Even though it isn't a 9mm, many adults consider it a meaningful choice when their clothing, routines, or daily environment demand a tool that disappears easily without adding weight. With its slim profile, compact frame, and simple design, the Bodyguard 380 feels very purpose-built, something meant for people who value lawful, deep concealment while still needing a center-fire caliber they trust. Its polymer frame and modest weight make it comfortable for all-day carry. Many versions come with rounded edges, a low-profile shape, and slide cuts that reduce snagging when worn under thin clothing. Despite being a small .380 ACP pistol, the Bodyguard line has earned a reputation for being surprisingly usable for such a tiny platform. Where many micro .380 pistols feel harsh, the Bodyguard's weight and layout help make the shooting experience less punishing compared to ultralight alternatives. The frame geometry is intentionally neutral, not too blocky, not too angled, making it approachable for a wide range of users. That said, the Bodyguard 380 comes with limitations clearly tied to its size. The short grip makes it difficult for many adults to place their entire hand on the frame. The pinky often floats unless using an extended magazine. The sight radius is very short, and while the gun can certainly be used responsibly within close, lawful distances, it isn't designed for anything beyond that. The 380 ACP caliber, despite being a valid centerfire option, still sits below 9mm in power, so choosing the Bodyguard means accepting the trade-off between comfort, concealability, and performance. Trigger feel varies across generations. The original model had a longer, heavier pull, while newer models improved smoothness. But it is still not as crisp as larger, compact handguns. On the price side, the Smith & Wesson M and P Bodyguard 380 belongs to the affordable to mid-range category. Depending on the generation, finish, and retailer, new examples often sit somewhere between the low 300s and mid 400s in United States dollars. The Bodyguard 2.0 versions with larger magazines naturally sit a bit higher. In the used market, older models can sometimes be found for noticeably less depending on condition. Within the broader theme of micro pistols smaller than your phone and way deadlier than you think, the Bodyguard 380 plays the role of the dependable multitasker. Small enough to live beside a phone in your pocket, light enough not to bother you through a full day, and serious enough that it demands all legal and safety responsibilities from its adult owner. It isn't the strongest, it isn't the most advanced, but for many people, it strikes the perfect balance between practicality, concealment, and trustworthiness. Number 5. Beretta 3032. Tomcat. Within this entire list, the Beretta 3032 Tomcat is the pistol with a very distinct personality. Small, classic, but carrying a technical trick that almost no other micro pistol has. The Tomcat's signature feature is its tip-up barrel, something that looks simple but is extremely rare in modern micro pistols. Instead of relying on the usual slide manipulation, the barrel can be tilted upward to access the chamber. For many adults who have weaker grip strength or simply prefer a different way of checking the chamber, this design feels surprisingly friendly. The moment you hold the Tomcat, you immediately sense a very Beretta vibe. An aluminum alloy frame, a stainless steel slide, and a rounded, snag-free profile that looks more like a tiny European pocket pistol from another era. Its overall length is about 4.92 inches, the height is around 3.7 inches, the width is about 1.1 inches, the barrel length is roughly 2.4 inches, and the weight when unloaded sits at just over 14 ounces. If you place it next to a small smartphone, the phone easily wins in footprint, which is why the Tomcat fits so naturally into the list: micro pistols smaller than your phone and way deadlier than you think. Working with 32 ACP ammunition, a 7-round magazine, and a double-action, single-action setup, the Tomcat delivers a very classic handgun feel that many enthusiasts love. The first pull is long and heavier, and the following shots are lighter. Combined with the Beretta styling, the metal frame, and the gentle recoil of 32 ACP, the shooting experience feels more like a miniature traditional pistol rather than a polymer pocket gun. The reason the Tomcat is chosen for this list isn't only its small size, it's also one of the true icons of the smartphone-sized pocket pistol concept. Beretta's inox and covert versions are often advertised as being about the size of a phone, made for adults who legally carry in a deep concealment role. Its aluminum frame, steel slide, rounded edges, and low-profile sights help it slip smoothly in and out of pockets or small holsters. The 32 ACP cartridge and the 14-ounce weight create a recoil many people describe as just right. Enough to remind you this is a real firearm, but not harsh like ultra-light micro 9mm or .380 pistols. However, the Tomcat carries several very clear downsides. First is the 32 ACP caliber, effective in the right conditions, but not comparable to 9mm. So many people today view the Tomcat as a backup or a choice for users who dislike stronger recoil. Second is the thickness. Although the gun is short and low in overall height, the frame is about 1.1 inches thick, making it a bit chubby compared to new generation micro 9mm that are thinner yet carry more rounds. Beretta has also warned against using overly high pressure .32 ACP ammo, since the small frame has historically shown signs of stress when repeatedly subjected to hotter than standard loads. A few versions even lack a traditional extractor, relying entirely on gas pressure to push the empty casing out. This means that if a round ever fails to fire, the user must rely on the tip-up mechanism to remove it, rather than cycling the slide like with other designs. The Tomcat also shares the universal drawbacks of pocket guns: a very short grip, making it hard for many adults to get their whole hand onto it. If the technique isn't solid, trigger control and sight steadiness become more sensitive. The low-profile sights are great for avoiding snags, but aren't ideal for long-distance accuracy. Its comfortable zone remains extremely close range, the kind where the user fully understands the limitations and always keeps safety and legal responsibility as their top priorities. In terms of price, the Beretta 3032 Tomcat sits in the mid-range, not cheap, but not luxury either. Modern versions like the inox or silver black often list at a bit over $500 to around $570 United States dollars, while recent market data shows new guns selling around $400 and used ones typically going for roughly $300 to $310, depending on condition and variant. In other words, buyers are paying for a well-known metal micro pistol, roughly the size of a small phone, with a unique tip-up design that few competitors offer. In the broader picture of micro pistols smaller than your phone and way deadlier than you think, the Beretta 3032 Tomcat feels like a tiny kitten with real claws. It's not the strongest option and not the perfect fit for everyone, but for those who know exactly what they need, accept the limits of 32 ACP, appreciate the tip-up system, and strictly follow all safety and legal rules, the Tomcat remains a charming and serious little piece. Smaller than a phone, European in character, and not something anyone should underestimate. Number 6. Kahr PM9. If the Kel-Tec P11 is the rough older brother of the subcompact 9mm world, then the Kahr PM9 is the more refined younger brother, born in the era of polished everyday carry. At first glance, it looks like a small block of steel and polymer, but when you compare it to the phone in your pocket, you immediately understand why it sits in the list micro pistols smaller than your phone, and way deadlier than you think. The overall length is about 5.42 inches. The height is around 4 inches. The width is roughly 0.9 inches. The barrel length falls somewhere between 3.0 and 3.1 inches. And the unloaded weight is only about 14 ounces. In other words, both the footprint and thickness of the PM9 are completely outmatched by a modern large-screen smartphone. Yet inside, it is a true 9mm Luger pistol with a 6+1 or 7+1 single-stack magazine, enough to step outside the world of .32 and .380 mouse guns and into the realm of miniaturized service caliber. Kahr's philosophy for the PM9 is very clear. This is a polymer Micro 9 designed for lawful concealed carry, prioritizing smooth shooting feel and slimness instead of chasing maximum capacity. In terms of advantages, the PM9 has everything a serious Micro 9 needs: a thin frame, a 3-inch barrel that gives stable performance, a 6+1 flush magazine with a 7+1 extended option, and steel rails inside the polymer frame for better long-term wear compared to metal rubbing directly against plastic. Its smaller than a phone size makes it a logical choice for people who need deep concealment while still wanting 9mm, like situations where thin clothing, light pants, or maximum discretion are required. The overall finish, from slide cuts to grip texture, isn't flashy like modern tactical releases, but the gun feels like a real tool. Minimal extra decoration, easy to keep clean, and lacking any shiny surfaces that draw unwanted attention. But the PM9 also carries some clear drawbacks. The long double-action only trigger, even though smooth, is something many new users struggle with. Without consistent sight discipline, shots tend to dip low or shift sideways. The grip is short and slim, causing people with large hands to leave their pinky hanging unless they use the extended magazine. Recoil, even when managed by the dual recoil springs, still isn't what you'd call soft compared to larger compact guns. Shooting many rounds in a single session requires good technique and thoughtful energy control. And a 6 or 7 round magazine obviously can't compete with modern micro double stacks like the P365. So the PM9 is always a choice for people who value thinness, lightweight, and the traditional Dow feel over capacity. As for price, the Kahr PM9 belongs to the small but not cheap category. Buyers are paying for a platform that has become a reference point for the entire market, with power, size, and accessory support that few competitors in the micro-compact space can ignore. Number 7. Kel-Tec P11. If the earlier pistols in this list feel like the new generation born in the smartphone era, then the Kel-Tec P11 is the strict old ancestor of the entire modern concealed carry handgun family. Released back in the mid-1990s, it came long before the P365, the Shield, and many of today's popular subcompacts. Holding the P11 in your hand, you can immediately see its design philosophy. Everything is rounded, compact, and flat, almost like a block of polymer and steel the size of, well, an old small-screen phone. With an overall length of about 5.6 inches, a height of 4.3 inches, a thickness of exactly 1 inch, and an unloaded weight of around 14 ounces, its footprint is easily smaller than a modern smartphone. Yet inside is a full-powered 9mm setup using a double-stack magazine with 10+1 rounds, and even an option for 12+1. That combination of 9x19 ammunition and a micro-sized body is exactly why it's included in micro pistols smaller than your phone, and way deadlier than you think. Smaller than something you carry every day, but far more serious than its size suggests. Structurally, the P11 uses a polymer outer frame wrapped around an internal aluminum frame, paired with a steel slide and a barrel around 3.1 inches long, working on a short recoil system with a double action-only trigger. The trigger pull is long and heavy, around 9 pounds, with no external safety lever, meaning the entire safety concept revolves around having to complete the full trigger stroke before anything happens. That makes it less comfortable on a range bench, but gives it a certain practicality for legal concealed carry, since accidental discharge is harder if the user follows basic safety principles. Even with a 10-round double-stack magazine, the frame remains only 1 inch thick. Very much the make it only slightly wider than the mag, then shave down everything else approach. Kel-Tec clearly tried to cram as much 9mm capability as physically possible into the smallest frame that still made sense. The P11 earns its place in this list, not just because it's smaller than a phone, but because it was one of the first pistols to prove that a subcompact 9mm double stack wasn't just a dream. Long before today's models took over the market, many plainclothes officers and civilian carriers picked the P11 as their it-gets-the-job-done, pocketable 9mm. Small enough to slip into a thin IWB holster, a jacket pocket, or a small sling bag, yet offering magazine capacity and power far beyond the 32 or 380 mouse guns of that era. Looking back today, the P11 feels like a prototype. Not as refined or slick as the generations that followed, but the pistol that set the standard for what would eventually become the norm. A firearm smaller than a phone that could still fire 9mm from a double-stack mag. Of course, this legacy comes with a very clear set of old-school pros and cons. The most obvious advantage is the balance between size and firepower. 10+1 rounds of 9mm in a frame only 1 inch thick, and weighing around 400 grams unloaded is still impressive even now. The polymer frame keeps it from feeling heavy on the belt, and the rounded edges reduce snagging when drawing from a holster or pocket. Its simple, low parts layout also means basic cleaning isn't too complicated. But on the downside, the long, heavy trigger pull is something many people must spend time getting used to. Without steady sight alignment during the entire pull, shots can drift. The recoil of a 9mm pistol that weighs only 14 ounces is also not particularly gentle, especially for new shooters, and the fairly short grip makes fast follow-up shots more sensitive to technique errors. Overall ergonomics are often described as raw, with a square grip feel and surface textures that aren't as refined as newer models. Another factor worth noting is that the P11 is now discontinued and replaced by more modern Kel-Tec designs. That creates a double-edged situation. On one hand, it's become a story piece for collectors or nostalgia fans. On the other hand, finding factory parts or official service is not as easy as it used to be. The upside is that this pushes the used market price into a more forgiving range. Back when it was still in production, its MSRP sat around $360 United States dollars, depending on configuration. Today, most P11s on the used market are listed somewhere around a bit over $100 to about $200, depending on condition, finish, and location. For the same money, you can find newer, smoother subcompact 9mm models. But few deliver the same rough but real character of a pistol that helped pave the way for an entire trend. In the broader picture of micro pistols smaller than your phone and way deadlier than you think, the Kel-Tec P11 is more of a historical milestone than a modern star. It reminds people that before the latest generation of micro 9mm came along, there was already a gun smaller than a phone carrying a double-stack magazine, and the philosophy of full power in a subcompact frame. If treated with proper respect for its historical role, used within the law, and handled with full safety discipline, the P11 can still be an interesting collector's item, or even a lawful self-defense tool for those willing to work with its heavy trigger, old-school ergonomics, and the demanding nature of its era of design. Number 8. Kel-Tec P32. If the Ruger LCP Max is the story of squeezing in more rounds, then the Kel-Tec P32 is the classic example of the philosophy, shrink it as far as physics will allow, then think about the rest. In person, it looks more like a tiny toy than a real firearm. About 5.1 inches long, roughly 3.5 inches tall, only around 0.75 inches thick, and weighing about 6.6 to nearly 7 ounces when unloaded. In other words, the surface area and thickness of the P32 are both beaten by the smartphone in your hand. And that's exactly why it gets a place in micro pistols smaller than your phone, and way deadlier than you think. Despite its tiny size, the P32 represents a major branch in micro gun evolution. Ultra-light, ultra-thin, and intentionally simple. Built around 32 ACP ammunition with a single stack magazine, the P32 is meant for people who prioritize extreme concealment within lawful carry frameworks. Its polymer frame, small footprint, and featherweight build make it the sort of tool that disappears into pockets, where even many modern micro 9mm guns would still struggle. The recoil, for most adult users, is described as light and noticeably more pleasant than that of many tiny .380 pistols, making practice less punishing. A capacity of 7+1 may sound modest on paper, but in the context of a frame smaller than a phone, it's actually pretty impressive. The simple internal layout and lack of unnecessary parts also mean that basic upkeep isn't overly complicated. Things like opening it, wiping it down, adding a minimal touch of oil, and putting it back together tend to be enough for routine lawful use. Of course, what makes the P32 appealing also creates its own list of limitations. The extremely small grip, only around 3.5 inches tall, means most adult users can't fit their entire hand on it. The pinky often ends up floating unless a magazine extension is used. That small grip magnifies any imperfections in hand placement, making it more sensitive to inconsistencies. Its tiny notch-style sights mean the pistol isn't built for anything beyond short distances. And while .32 ACP has dedicated fans, many people feel it has less margin compared to 9mm or .380 in worst-case scenarios. So the P32 is, by nature, more of a true backup than a primary option. Another commonly mentioned downside is that the gun can be somewhat picky with certain .32 ACP hollow point designs. Long or unusual bullet shapes sometimes don't travel smoothly along the short feeding path, leading many users to prefer high-quality FMJ rounds, or to carefully test shorter-bodied hollow points if planning long-term use. Because this pistol often lives inside pockets, lint, dust, and debris are issues anyone using deep concealment tools has to accept. That's why many longtime users recommend very light lubrication instead of bathing it in oil, which can turn a pocket into a lint collector. In terms of price, the Kel-Tec P32 sits in the reasonable for a major brand, but very specialized category. Manufacturer pricing usually ranges from a little over $320 to around $369 United States dollars, depending on finish. Out in the market, the basic black versions typically run somewhere around $280 to over $330, depending on region and availability. It isn't as cheap as some budget .380 options, but buyers are paying for an ultralight, ultra-thin design with many years of proven use as a deep backup or extremely discreet everyday carry tool. Within the big picture of this list, the Kel-Tec P32 is like the foundation stone. Not flashy, not trying to show off the newest technology, but the starting point for an entire generation of micro centerfire pistols that came after. It's smaller than the phone in your pocket, light enough to forget about, yet still carries all the responsibilities of a real firearm. It must be used within the law, treated seriously, and handled with full respect for safety and responsibility.
9.
Sig Sauer P238. In this list of micro pistols, the Sig Sauer P238 is the nostalgic character that still manages to be incredibly practical. At a glance, it looks like a tiny Colt Mustang, or a Mini Commander. Metal frame, slim grip, clearly a 1911 style silhouette, but squeezed down into a very compact package. The overall length is around 5.5 inches. The height is just under 4 inches. The width is roughly 1.1 inches. And the weight is a little over 15 ounces when empty. So, if you place it next to a large screen smartphone, it may match in length, but the height and overall footprint are smaller, making it easy to disappear inside a pocket, jacket, or a thin inside the waistband holster. Paired with 380 ACP ammunition, a barrel of about 2.7 inches, and a 6 or 7 round single stack magazine, the P238 is one of the clearest examples of the idea behind micro pistols smaller than your phone, and way deadlier than you think. Almost the size of something you carry every day, yet built as a real firearm, with an aluminum alloy frame and stainless steel slide instead of polymer toy-like materials. What many people love about the P238 is the sense of a real pistol, packed into a pocket-sized body. The grip is small, but cut at 1911 angles. So, when brought up to eye level, the muzzle naturally lines up more predictably than the more blocky micro pistols. Its single-action trigger isn't dangerously light, but it has a clean break, short travel, and a predictable feel, which gives people confidence at close to moderate distances, especially those familiar with the cocked and locked style. Most versions come with proper night sights rather than decorative metal slabs, so picking up the target in dim lighting is still doable. With a weight of 15.2 ounces, .380 ACP ammunition, and a metal frame, the recoil sits in the snappy but manageable range. It's not as soft as larger guns, but also not the kind of harsh snap some ultralight pocket pistols are known for. Its place on this list, aside from the compact size, comes from the way it balances shootability and concealability. Next to the even smaller polymer micros, the P238 might lose a little in thinness or weight, but when put to real use, most people find they shoot faster and more accurately with this small SIG. The short sight radius and small grip do mean it's a pistol designed for close distances, usually in the 3 to 7 yard range, with controlled, deliberate shots. But because of the clean trigger, metal frame, and just enough weight, the rhythm of follow-up shots tends to be more consistent than with many ultra-compact .380 pistols. Number 10. Trailblazer Lifecard. If the Kimber Micro 9 feels like a shrunken version of a service pistol, then the Trailblazer Lifecard is more like a prop straight out of a spy movie. When folded, it looks almost exactly like a tiny metal card case, about 3.37 inches long, around 2.125 inches tall, about half an inch thick, and weighing roughly 7 ounces, meaning its footprint is even smaller than most smartphones today. That alone earns it a place in the list, micro pistols smaller than your phone, and way deadlier than you think. At a glance, it looks like a toy or a mini power bank, but when unfolded, it becomes a functioning single-shot Derringer chambered for 22 long rifle ammunition. The Lifecard's philosophy is very clear. It's not meant to be a primary gun. It's the last resort flotation device for people who already have a lawful self-defense setup, but want an extra layer of deep concealment. The barrel is about 2.5 inches long. It works with a simple single-action setup, and it holds 1 round in the chamber, while the grip section has space to store 3 extra rounds. In exchange for its extremely small size and featherweight build, the recoil is minimal. However, the practical effect of 22 long rifle ammunition is tied to very close distances and careful ammunition choice. So people who study this model generally see it as something used only when there is absolutely nothing else. When opened in its firing configuration, the Lifecard gives you a grip that's just long enough to hold on to, but it still has that very flat, very slim feel. The tiny controls and the almost non-existent sights on some versions make it better suited for slow, deliberate shots at short distances rather than trying to stretch things farther. This creates both strengths and limitations. People with steady presentation and clean trigger discipline can get the most out of it, while those who rely on strength or rapid strings of fire quickly feel its boundaries. Because of its ultra-compact structure, feeding and emptying the chamber in a tight space can be sensitive to certain kinds of ammunition. So serious reviews often recommend testing each specific .22 long rifle load thoroughly if someone intends to trust it long term. The Lifecard is on this list, not just because it's smaller than a phone, but because it pushes the idea of deep concealment to the extreme. Folded, it can fit in places traditional pocket pistols struggle to. For people who prioritize keeping their lawful defensive tool as unnoticed as possible, the folding card shape is a clear advantage. Another strong point is its sturdy steel and aluminum construction, its uniform thickness, its lack of snag-prone parts, and a mechanical safety system that prevents the gun from firing while folded, giving more peace of mind when it sits close to other belongings. But those same traits also create a list of drawbacks anyone interested should accept from the start. A one-round capacity means that any mistake, from ammunition selection to trigger handling, leaves no immediate second attempt. Opening, preparing, firing, and, if needed, reloading all take more time compared to a small pocket auto or a compact revolver. The .22 long rifle ammunition has benefits like soft recoil and low noise, but it demands that users take ammunition quality and its limitations very seriously. On top of that, cleaning the chamber, maintaining contact surfaces, and keeping an eye on the small springs inside is something that should happen more frequently than with larger guns if someone wants the Lifecard to stay reliable in its backup role. On pricing, the Lifecard is not in the cheap just for fun category. The basic .22 long rifle versions usually list around $300 to over $360 United States dollars, while real market prices often land somewhere between about $270 and a bit over $350, depending on version, color, and retailer. That means users are paying for a very specific piece of pocket engineering, ultra-thin, ultra-concealable, simple in operation, but not meant for anyone looking for a general-purpose firearm. In the bigger picture, the Trailblazer Lifecard is like a quiet accent note in the micro pistol lineup. Not flashy, not loud, just waiting patiently for the moment it's truly needed. As long as the owner clearly understands what to expect and always follows the law and all safety rules when handling it. Number 11, Kimber Micro 9. If this list were a movie, the Kimber Micro 9 would be the opening character. Small, polite-looking, kind of gentle at first glance. But anyone who has tried it before knows it's a very serious tool. It's a 9mm single-action pistol that's only a little over 6 inches long, a bit more than 4 inches tall, about 1 inch thick, and weighs roughly 15.5 ounces when empty. That means it takes up about the same length as a large smartphone, but it's noticeably shorter and slimmer. That steel smartphone size is exactly what lets the Micro 9 earn a spot on the list. Micro pistols smaller than your phone, and way deadlier than you think, because it brings full 9mm power into a frame that a shirt pocket, pants pocket, or waistband can easily swallow if set up correctly. What makes many people see the Micro 9 differently compared to polymer micro pistols is that it feels like a miniaturized 1911. The grip is thin, but has that familiar curve, and the angle is close to the 1911, so raising it to eye level feels like switching from a full-size version to a scaled-down copy. Its single-action trigger isn't the super light match type, but it's cleaner and more predictable than many double-action micro pistols, giving a more confident first shot at close to moderate distances. On the inside, this thing is very much a true pocket pistol. It uses 9mm Luger ammunition, has a single stack magazine with 6 or 7 rounds depending on the mag, and pairs that with a 3.15-inch short recoil setup that stabilizes the round while keeping the overall package compact. The reason the Micro 9 appears in this list isn't because it's the smallest or the newest. It's because it sits at an interesting crossroads between pocket gun and service pistol. With its weight and size, many adults find it manageable in normal, safe use, and they can work with it effectively as long as they take training seriously. People familiar with the 1911 platform often feel that this is an easier transition into the Micro 9mm world, instead of having to relearn everything on an unfamiliar polymer frame. In real-world evaluations, the Micro 9 proves it isn't just a backup piece. It can fully serve as a primary option in close-range, legal self-defense contexts, as long as the user understands the limited magazine capacity. Of course, a pistol this small isn't without drawbacks. The Micro 9 is known for being a bit selective about who can handle it comfortably. If someone's technique isn't stable, or if extremely light ammunition is used, some units may show sensitivity in early break-in periods when internal surfaces are still fresh. The single-stack magazine is thinner than a double-stack, so many owners treat spring replacement and rotating mags as a normal maintenance habit rather than an optional one. And the single-action trigger requires proper, formal safety training, because the short travel and clear break don't forgive careless handling. Compared to its polymer rivals, the Micro 9 isn't cheap either. New retail prices usually sit around $600 United States dollars for the standard versions, while decorated, engraved, or custom shop editions can push close to or even above the $900 mark. Used ones often land somewhere around $450 to $500, depending on condition. What the Micro 9 does best is maintain a difficult balance. Small enough to stay beside an adult user in everyday lawful carry, comfortable enough for regular practice, without the harsh punishment of ultra-light micros, but still serious enough that no one should mistake it for a fashion accessory. If every model in this list represents a different philosophy of small guns, then the Kimber Micro 9 is the statement piece that shows you can shrink a classic platform without losing its soul. As long as you're willing to accept the cost, maintain it properly, and most importantly, follow the law and safety rules every single time you touch the trigger. Micro pistols that are smaller than a smartphone sound exciting at first glance, but at the end of the day, they're still real weapons. And real weapons come with real responsibility. If the laws where you live allow you to own and carry a firearm, then the most important thing isn't which model looks the nicest, which one is the smallest, or which one holds the most rounds. What truly matters is how well you understand the law, how seriously you train, and how consistently you respect safety. If you can't meet those three things, then it's better to let these tiny yet dangerous tools stay on your screen, not in your pocket.